Alright, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ovens Garage. Today I'm going to be working on my wife's BMW X5. It's the 2003 with the M54 engine. I'm going to be changing out the valve cover from the stock valve cover on the M54 engine to the M56 valve cover. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I live in a cold climate here, and even though I just changed the CCV from the stock CCV back in August to the winter version CCV, sorry, that's under the intake. I've already noticed there's a problem with the mayonnaise buildup in both the CCV lines as well as underneath the oil cap. And the primary reason why I'm doing this is to prevent that, because in the M56 valve cover, the CCV is built into the valve cover and it heats up directly from the heat of the motor, instead of being underneath the intake and away from the heat of the engine, allowing that mayonnaise type of buildup. So a couple things I've read online is to prevent this sort of buildup, you need to do long trips and have the engine up to temperature. But even in cold climate here in Winnipeg, that might be sort of a hard thing to avoid. So that's the primary reason why I'm doing this, is in order to prevent that mayonnaise type buildup. And then a benefit from that is that the CCV is no longer underneath the intake and hard to service. It's on the top of the valve cover if you ever actually do need to service it. So a couple things you'll need for this install. The first thing that you need to do is go under in the engine bay, in the M54 engine bay, and take a look and see what type of ignition coils you have. I have the skinnier version that doesn't bolt on. I think they're called the pencil coils, and they just push into here. So if you already have those, that's great. It makes the swap much easier and you don't need to buy ignition coils. If you have the bolt-on kind, you're going to need to get the pencil style coils. The big thing here, the valve cover itself, this is where the CCV sits. I'm going to not tamper with this because I've heard that, read that even though there are replacements for the CCV, there's been some people that have been having issues with this after they try to service it. So I'm just going to leave that alone, and I'll clean up as best as I can underneath. So this valve cover, you can reuse the oil cap from your old one you need. What I did was I bought another CCV kit, so that way I could replace a couple of the hoses, and I'll run directly from this, and then I'll go straight to the intake with a couple of those lines. You need the gasket itself, as well as the gasket for the coils here that goes in the middle. And then you don't necessarily need, but I bought, or this one came with the dipstick tube, so that way the return from the stock CCV is no longer there. I just plugged mine for now. I'm not going to replace this, and I ended up actually breaking the top when I took it out. But next time I'm deep into the engine bay, I'll put this in, but for now I'm just going to leave it. They also sent the wiring harness from the M56 that was on top of the valve cover. I'm not sure yet if I'll be needing that, because I have the pencil style coils. I might be able to it might just be plug and play for me, but I'll investigate once I install it. But while I'm in there, I'm going to be doing the Vanos rebuild as well as the spark plugs. So I got a set of spark plugs and a Vanos rebuild kit. I'm not going to be doing a video on those. There's lots of videos online on how to do that. So I'm reusing the gasket that came with the M56 valve cover, as well as those plug gaskets. I did pick up a new set of these O-rings for the valve cover bolts though, because I think I'm missing a few that came on here, and now's a good time to replace those ones anyways. These valve covers are quite expensive. They're like $100. I didn't really look and see these ones, maybe like $20-30. But these are reusable anyways, so I'm gonna reuse those. All right, so I got my wife's car in the garage here. Got Mr. Earl with me today, being the shop dog. So I'm just cleaning up this valve cover here, and inside the valve cover, I'm not gonna get this perfect, but what I did was I took off, this is the internal CCV, it's got two covers on it, and it was just caked with like a crusty oil on the inside. All on the inside here. So I just scraped all the big chunks off, and then you can see into here is where the diaphragm is for the CCV. But the whole purpose of this thing, as I understand it, is to separate the oil and the oily vapors, return the oil into the crankcase, and then have the vapors come through the diaphragm and then out this tube, and then that would go straight to the intake. So that way if you didn't have this, the oily vapors would go straight to the intake. So right now, that's the way I've got it routed in this car, is it's going direct to intake. So it's burning those oily vapors. So I'm assuming that you're going to be losing oil. So in this case, it comes through, it goes like this, sort of like that. The oily vapors enter there, go through, get this off, go through all these passages through here, and then I'm assuming that the oil itself drips back down maybe through that hole, but the vapors continue up through the diaphragm. So because of gravity and the pressure pushing on the diaphragm, the oil itself comes back here through that hole, and then the vapors go through the diaphragm, through this passage, and then out that hole to the intake. So I think that's how it works. I might be understanding it differently. If you know it operates differently, comment down below, because I'd really like to understand how it works. Otherwise, it's pretty simple system, I guess. So I'm not going to get this perfectly clean. Like I said, I just wanted to get all the big chunks off. I realized that a portion of this gasket broke here, so I'm just going to throw a small bead of RTV there. Put that back on, put this cover back on. I'm not going to take the CCV cap off. And then I'll consider that good once I do a final wipe down, and then I can start pulling the existing valve cover off, as well as the coil packs, and then I'm going to do the Vanos rebuild, and then we'll get everything thrown back on. Okay, so on this E53 X5, in order to get good access to everything, I'm going to take this off. I'll take the clutch fan off, as well as the fan shroud. I'm also going to take this piece off right here. It comes out like that big plastic piece in the center. That whole thing can come out. That way I'll have good access to remove the valve covers and do work on the Vanos. All right, so I've got the old valve cover off. As you can see, there's not really much of a mayo buildup now, but after a couple short drives, there really was. So we had it on a couple longer drives, and it seems like it actually did get rid of most of that mayo substance in there. But there was some in the CCV hoses themselves. So, like I said there, got the new valve cover all cleaned up. You can see that's the oil cap from the old one. It fits on there. Got my gaskets ready to go. I've got the old valve cover off here. You can see what it all looks like. When I pulled the Vanos off, I'm rebuilding the Vanos right now. It's on the workbench. So I'll get that all rebuilt, replace the seals, and throw it back on here, and then I'll be able to place the M56 valve cover back on. Here's a quick look though at the hose routing while we're in here, so you can see this a little bit better. This is one of the hose ends from the CCV kit, and I just took 5/8 inside diameter hose and ran it underneath. You can see it's sort of kinked though. I might change that. It's not really working the best. I might reroute that actually, now that I look at that. It's sort of kinked. But I might just take that and go right over the top. And then you can see I teed in. So using the stock portion that goes from the CCV kit, it goes up and over. I use that hose as well as this one to go on the front of the intake. So that way it still pulls a vacuum on the crankcase. All right, I've got the Vanos rebuilt and thrown back on now. I can go ahead and throw the new valve cover on. Before I throw the valve cover on, I just want to show you for the gasket. I placed the gasket on the engine surface and then the spark plug gaskets on the valve cover. But what I did was I put some black RTV here into the half moon and then here on all 4 of the half moons, as well as there's the Vanos to engine block area right there. I just put a little bead of RTV onto each seam, so that way there's no leaks. So now I'll go ahead and throw the valve cover just on top of that gasket, and then I can begin to tighten things down. All right, another quick update here. I've got the valve cover on, all the valve cover bolts torqued down. I changed out all the spark plugs. I put some of these NKG laser platinums in. They're much nicer quality. I got all the ignition coil packs back in. I didn't change any of the wiring here, so we'll see if it works. They just plug right in because I had the pencil style coils before. And then as for the vacuum routing, I had to change because the one that I had in there plumbed right to the intake was didn't fit the M56 valve cover. This M56 valve cover seemed to be a little bit bigger, but this 90 fit. So what I'm using is one of these factory pieces. I think this is the one that goes from the intake here down to the CCV. So I just repurposed it here. Used a vacuum plug here, goes 90, and then it shoots right up, and then it's a tight fit into this. And then what I did with this line, I just cut it, plugged it, and then it's still in its location there. So I'll still pull a vacuum from the intake here to the valve cover, so that should be okay. And then as for the wiring, we'll see if the engine starts here shortly. I'm just gonna get the fan and the rest of the plastics back on up front. All right, everything's back together. Moment of truth. We'll see if this car starts. So I might be able to reuse the cover plate that goes here, but I definitely won't be able to reuse the cover plate that goes over here. I think there's a specific M56 cover plate that goes on this side, but otherwise everything still looks pretty stock. So I'll get you on the camera stand here and start up the car. All right, so that wraps up the M56 valve cover installation. I'll test the car out for maybe a week or two and get some driving under my belt with the M56 valve cover and let you know how it feels under this setup. Otherwise, this job's considered done. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps if you're considering upgrading to an M56 valve cover. Cheers.